So we'll call the meeting to order. So we have a action-packed agenda here tonight. We're going to start with our public comments, then go around to our commissioner comments. We've got a couple of presentations here, police officer background process, a homework conversation that we're going to have as a group. Then we're going to have a couple of reviews, and then decide our biannual retreat date, and finish with community outreach. Any questions concerning the agenda tonight? Fantastic. So let's go ahead with public comments. The first one we have is Jack. Come on up. So we have 3 minutes, and I'll hold the sign up.
Okay.
We're getting close, okay?
Okay, very good.
Go ahead.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have spoken to you before. Some of you may remember me. I've generally been on about police use of force, and this question has, of course, come to national attention over the last several years, and there has been much reasonable outrage and anger about the repeated cases we see of excessive use of force, of people being shot, of failure to discipline when policy is violated, failure to prosecute by DAs. And we know that Eugene has had its own problems in this regard. However, as someone who has spoken on these issues and will continue to do so, I believe it is incumbent on me and others who have the same position to acknowledge when the police department does something very right, even if tragically and horribly unfortunate. And in the recent shooting at a middle school, where an individual died as a result of the police firing, I can only say, as someone who has worked school security before in an unarmed capacity but dealt with guns, my hat is off to the two officers who were involved in the incident as having operated in exactly the manner that we would hope they would. And the results were horrible, but I feel I have to apologize on behalf of the justice community in this town for some people who spoke out based not on the facts of the case, but on their general perception of these kind of situations. And I know this added to the stress for the two officers involved, and probably for the whole department as well, some of the statements that were made. They should not have been made, and I hope apologies will come from some of these folks, although we shall see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next we have Gene Stacy. Again, I'll hold this sign up for 20 seconds, so 3 minutes. I'll hold this up for 20 seconds.
Hi, I wanted to thank y'all mainly for doing what you're doing in terms of reviewing the policies as they relate to homeless people. I sent each of you a letter today. I don't know if you've had a chance to review it. I wanted to stress that I'm not here to talk at all about any individual policeman's behavior or to make any kind of complaint. These are all policy issues. And I think a little bit of a way to assert that is just to show you, just to assert that these are policy issues. One of the things is that 90 days of storage is required under Levon versus LA, which was a Ninth Circuit Court decision. And here on the city of Eugene, they're notifying people, which we were thrilled they at least notified them, that things would only be stored for 30 days. It's the reason Levon made 90, which seemed ridiculous to me, is so often when people's things are taken, it's because they've been sent to jail or the hospital, whatever. Or they don't have cars to go get them. So this is something I think you can correct. And I would like to point out too, that Public Works, which is not your responsibility, along with the police now, are not ticketing too much for camping since that's against Boise VLA, but they are removing people's items and destroying them immediately. Another thing that I talk about in here is the fact that criminal trespass to an open container are used quite a bit, and they're being continued over all the years I've been involved with this. They're lodged primarily around against people who are homeless. And to show that, this is a woman who was homeless for about 15 years in Eugene. She and the other gentleman I'm talking about both died on the streets here. She spent during 7 years 596 nights in jail. 596. Her friend, Jerry, spent 708 nights in jail. Those same 7 years. 89% of Jenny's citations were criminal trespass to an open container. Sometimes she was cited 18 times in one day and thrown in jail, and she got back out 10 days later, and 3 days later she had 13 charges. This was all taken directly from the Lane County Jail records. And again, I want to allege, this is not police being bad. It's policy, and it's unwritten policy. But I hope you'll really look at the unwritten things as well as the written things. Okay? And thank you for the work you're doing. Any time I can answer any questions, bring you more information, I'm happy to. I worked real hard on this, so I hope you'll be able to take the time and find out it makes sense. Okay.
Your work shows.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Next, we have Julie Lambert. Keep drawing this, I'll point for 20 seconds before you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Julie Lambert. I came here tonight because, as Jean pointed out, Jenny, I knew her as well, and I was out there myself, and my story ends on a little higher note. It took me pretty much the national average to obtain housing. I'm in transitional housing now, so that went well for me, but not for her. And there's lots of other people out there that are in need of assistance. And at this time, I'm just doing the Band-Aid solution, handing things out at the Egan Learning Centers, and just trying to help out where I can. But even though my situation has improved, there are a lot of people out there that need a compassionate approach. There's several cities across the United States that have wonderful models, from Los Angeles or Orlando, to name a few. And we already have a crisis team in place in the form of Cahoots. So, I've been coming and addressing this situation since about 2011. I know Eugene and a lot of other people have many more years. And my hope would be that you can continue to do things like put this on the agenda so that we can really have an open discussion, and that we can kind of not look at it as an us versus them mentality, and not put Band-Aids on it. The various cities, Orlando in particular, they said that they were spending annually about $30,000 a person for someone that was unhoused, and they were able to drop that figure down to $12,000. That's pretty significant. So I just remain hopeful that we can come up with a great solution for this wonderful city. This is my home. I love it here. I didn't expect to be unhoused. I just had an accident, and that's what happened. So if it could happen to me, it could happen to other people, and I see those people pretty much every day. So thank you for bringing this up and addressing it, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and on the way. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any other public comments? Moving up through the agenda, we have the review and approval of the December and January minutes. So we didn't have a quorum last time. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move approval of both minutes.
Second.
A second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Nobody's opposed. Minutes are approved. Okay, now we have a presentation and overview of the police officer background process, and joining us at the table will be Lieutenant Tinseth and Sergeant Pope.
I'm Sergeant Marcus Pope, the background team supervisor. This is Lieutenant Ron Tinseth. So we're here today to talk about our background investigation, kind kind of describe, give you an overview of what the hiring process looks like, and then how we move from there into background investigation. So our background investigation team is approximately 40 plus members of the department, sworn, 20 from patrol and detectives, and then another 20 from the supervisory level, made up of sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. The background investigation team is a special team that an officer or detective has to put in for. There's a process where you ask them to submit some investigations that they completed. We'll review those to make sure that they have the necessary skills to be a background investigator, and if they pass that, they are brought onto the team. Training on the team, in addition to basic police investigations, which officers and detectives already have, they're required to attend a 2-day background training that we either put on here or that we post through the Oregon Background Investigators Association. So it's about a 16-hour course. It covers anything from applicable laws regarding HIPAA, ADA, kinds of questions you can and can't ask and answer about medical, substance abuse, rehabilitation, and we get legal updates. Background investigators also attend refresher trainings, and there's also elective training out there, such as the re-interview and interrogation course. Primary purpose, we want to hire candidates who are suitable for the role they have applied for and have a high probability of success based on their technical skills and job dimensions. We have various job dimensions we look for with police officer candidates: communication skills, problem solving. And so during the course of the investigation, our investigators tailor their questions to potential employers and to the candidate themselves to kind of root out, past practice is a good predictor for future performance. So we tailor our investigations to follow that. As I mentioned before, we have different legal considerations, complying with equal opportunity employers, related legislation, and we follow a structured process. So every time we do a background investigation, we follow the exact same process so we don't deviate and you don't get any kind of biases developed that way. Again, organizational considerations, we want to hire the best people out there, people with high moral aptitude and high skill. And backgrounds are something we take very seriously here. That's why we dedicate so much time and training to doing them. So our hiring process overview, we have the application phase, and that's our first level of screening that we do. As applications come into human resources, they're looking for questions that applicants are required to answer about prior convictions for misdemeanors and felonies, and then they're screened out at that point. And if they pass that initial screening, they're invited to the testing process with us. The testing phase is held on Saturday with our condensed hiring down to a 90-day start to finish. We conduct our testing on a Saturday, which includes the written test, which is a 100 question multiple choice test taken via online, so we get immediate results. This tests candidates' memory, reading comprehension, analytical. If they're successful at the written test, they move on to the Oregon Physical Agility Test, which tests their physical coordination and strength to make sure that they meet a minimum threshold to work as a police officer. And if they're successful on Saturday, then they will interview with us Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday immediately following. Again, the interview is about 30 minutes, held in front of a predetermined panel with our hiring committee. If they're successful at interview, they'll move into the full background phase, which is where the background investigation team takes over. Part of the background investigation involves a chief's interview with Chief Skinner, where he'll pose various questions to him based on reviewing the background investigation completed. If they're successful there, they'll get a conditional job offer, which then moves them on to a psychological evaluation phase and a pre-employment physical or medical. So part of our team involves hiring managers. We have designated hiring sergeants who are Sergeant Greg Magnus and Sergeant Kyle Evans. They make recommendations based on reviewing the completed backgrounds. We have a captain division manager and ops support, and chief of police as the final hiring authority. I work as the background sergeant. I handle all the background phases, make assignments, and advise investigators as they come to me with questions. And our human resources staff, they're involved through every phase of this. They review our final product to make sure that we're in compliance with ADA and CJIS, which is the criminal justice investigation system. The city of Eugene completes 3 levels of backgrounds. Level 3 background is the highest in the city. Involves a personal history questionnaire, a personal history statement, a records check, credit check, psychological evaluation, and a medical evaluation. The personal history questionnaire is essentially a document of self-disclosure. The applicant completes it online at home. It's approximately 100 questions, and it covers everything from education, military service, prior law enforcement, driving, financial history, substance use, and general information such as tattoos and what kind of weapons they own. So this is our initial screening document. From this, we get a generated report which lists kind of what we view as serious admissions in a couple different levels. And that'll be the first investigation level that an investigator will get. The personal history statement is also completed at the same time. It's a 27-page document and essentially covers most of the previous 10 years, but typically it'll cover lots for more than that, typically back to your entire life history. We want employment history for the previous decade. We'll look at educational, such as transcripts, what kind of student were you? What schools did you go to? If you're in the military service, if you got out, we ask for a DD 214. We'll look to see if you have what kind of discharge you had. Residential history, including roommates for the previous 10 years. Our investigators will conduct home visits. We'll talk to who you paid rent to or mortgage to. We'll talk to previous roommates to see what your activities were as you're growing up. We'll talk to relatives, social acquaintances, professional contacts, professional references. We're going to look at your financial history. How many credit cards do you own? What are your balances on each? Are you financially responsible? Making wise decisions? We're going to look at your legal history. Have you ever been arrested before? What was it for? We're going to pull your police reports if you were. We're going to look at your citations, traffic crashes, what kind of driver are you? And we're going to look at previous processes and other agencies you applied to. A lot of times we'll see repeat applicants come through other processes where they're not successful, and then we're able to go back and look at those documents to verify the information you give us is the same thing you gave them. We also utilize an accurate report, which is through LexisNexis. It's a paid service we use, and based on the name and social security number, we're able to pull a wide variety of information, such as residential history, utility bills, employment, DMV information, legal history, motor vehicle registration, relatives, and former roommates. So initially, after they pass the interview, I receive all the candidate information, and from there I make a travel decision. So our background investigators will travel to another state or another part of our state if it's within 3 years of moving to Oregon. If they currently reside in another state, then we're going to send an investigator there, because we found that face-to-face contact and the ability to review records, employment history, you get a lot more accurate responses and honest responses from folks face-to-face versus just over a telephone. From there, I'm going to create a background file. It's a thick packet, about like this. It has all the documents contained in it that an investigator is going to need, and then I'll assign it to the background investigator with a due date. So typically, we allow 2 to 3 weeks to complete the background investigation. Investigator is going to take a look at the packet, review all the information. From there, they're going to set an initial interview with the candidate. Initial interview with a candidate can take anywhere from 2.5 up to 5 hours, depending on the applicant history and how old they are. So we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to cover that personal history questionnaire I talked to you about, self-disclosure document. We'll cover the personal history statement. And from that, we're going to develop additional information, additional contacts, maybe folks that you didn't list or you didn't list enough contacts. We're going to make requirements that you go out and get us some more information. We go through a background interview question. We're going to ask you 212 questions based on everything. We're talking about where you lived, where you work, what you did, what your hobbies, activities are, what clubs you're in. We'll cover prior drug use, what you used, how many times, when. Because there's a lot of things we're trying to develop any kind of information so we can go out later and find any information that contradicts what you're going to tell us initially. We're going to go over your application, and then we're going to fingerprint you for CJIS clearance. It's done through the Oregon State Police. Fingerprints get submitted by live scan, and from there get sent up to the state, and they're just going to verify that you don't have a criminal record by fingerprint, which allows you access to our facility. So our facility here is considered a CJIS facility. If you want to have unescorted access, you have to pass that step. And then everything we do with candidates, audio recorded for accuracy later. So during the investigation, like I said before, the investigator is going to visit your employer. It's going to conduct interviews with supervisors. We're going to talk to coworkers. Depending on your line of work, we may talk to your customers. We're going to ask for secondary contacts. So if you're a coworker, and I'm asking, do you guys hang out outside of work? Who else are his friends? Who does he hang out with? And we're going to gather personnel files, get your evaluations. We'll talk to your spouse or partner, relatives, friends. We'll conduct a surprise home visit when you don't expect it, because we want to know, how do you live your life? If we go there and your house is very, unkempt, dishes piled up in the sink, lawns a foot tall. These are kind of traits we want to know about people. And we're going to talk to your neighbors as well, see what kind of neighbor you are, what kind of interactions you've had. Because a lot of times your neighbors are always watching you. They'll see how you're acting, see how you come home. We've had cases before where neighbors can overhear domestic disputes you have with a spouse or a partner. We're going to gather all this information, and then if we find anything that's contradictory to what you initially told us in this interview, we hold what's called a discrepancy interview. So we're going to bring you back in again. It's audio recorded, and we're going to say, hey, you initially told me this, and we found this. What can you tell me about that? And we're going to try to get some admissions for contradictory information. Were they intentionally lying? Was it just negligence? Had enough time gone by? Did they honestly forget about it? And when the investigator finishes that, they're going to write a final background memorandum documenting all their findings. So these reports are typically about 20 pages long. I've seen them up to 34 to 40 pages. Typically an in-state background will take about 40 hours to complete. If you go out of state, that could be anywhere from 40 up to 55, depending on how far you had to go and what kind of distances you had to cover. From there, investigator submits the background packet to me. I review for accuracy and completeness. I make sure that no ADA information or CJIS information makes it into the memo itself. We'll send it to HR. They'll also review it, make sure everything in there is legally okay. And then from there, I send it to our hiring sergeants, Greg Magnus and Cal Evans. And from there, they're going to review the document, and they're going to make a recommendation based on reviewing the investigation, which will go to Chief Skinner. If they get a positive recommendation, we'll schedule an interview with the chief, and the chief will interview them, and if successful, issues them a conditional job offer. If an applicant is determined to have failed the background, they are barred from applying for us for 2 years. Background investigation is retained here in the department for 10 years. And then if for some reason an applicant does reapply again after 2 years, we'll pull their old file, meet it with the new file, and then those get filed away together. So typically it's not unusual for a document to be here for up to 16 years. If an applicant has failed background 3 times, they're permanently disqualified from reapplying with the department. And the information that we gather, we share with other agencies based on an understanding of confidentiality. And it's kind of a standard agreement we have with other departments that we all want to keep the wrong people out of law enforcement. So we're going to share information with each other to make sure that we can do that. And most law enforcement agencies cooperate with one another to allow for this to happen. Psychological evaluation. After the conditional job offer, the applicant works with human resources to complete paperwork with the psychologist. Again, they're going to come in for about 4 hours, and they're going to complete hundreds of different Scantron things, and that's, I can't really answer too much about that. It's more at the psychologist level. And the psychologist will review that. Once they get it run, they're going to meet with the candidate, either in person or via Skype, depending on location. And then from there, we're going to hold a debrief after the psychologist has reviewed everything, conducted her interview. She's going to come here and give her findings, and that's going to involve a meeting involving the chief, human resources, the hiring sergeants, myself, and Lieutenant Tinseth and Tim Sheck, our division manager. Chief's going to make a final determination there. If they are deemed to have failed the psych process, then they're barred for 2 years from reapplying. Medical evaluation is also kind of run in conjunction with the psychological evaluation. It's conducted through Mackenzie Willamette and Cascade Health Solutions. And it's just a standard physical toxicology screen. They do a treadmill stress test, checking your heart. And then again, a failed medical will bar you for 2 years. If they pass the medical and psychological exam, they're given a final offer, job offer. They're given a start date to meet with our training academy staff. From there, they're scheduled for the state academy, and then from there into field training. And then after that, hopefully the final product. That's about it. Any questions? Yes, sir.
You didn't mention, but it seems like it would be useful to have a polygraph at some point.
It would be nice to have that. Oregon has state law that prevents us from using a polygraph test.
People actually pass this?
One or two.
Yeah, we.
Well, there's 3 of them. So there are 4 of them sitting there.
It's a measure of determination, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just wondered if you, at any point along this process, checked social media for the person.
We do.
Didn't see
So
it
part of that
mentioned,
is social media. Some of the new law that came out prevents us from requiring them to log in. If they have an open page, we can just view that. There's also some other open sources we can use to find things that they've either commented on other people's posts. And we have a recent case where we were able to find quite a bit of disparaging information about candidate based on that.
Good. I mean, not good that there was that, but good that you're checking.
So I have 2 questions. One, has this process changed significantly in the last couple of years? Or has it remained pretty consistent?
This has remained pretty consistent. This is very consistent. I've been a background investigator for 9 years.
Okay.
It's been consistent through that.
Okay. Another
So
question.
The timing, to speak to that, the timing has changed in the process, but the depth and the thoroughness that we investigate people is remained consistent. So our standards are very high.
Pretty high.
The only new thing in there, Joel, is my interview.
Got it.
That is a new thing that I've always felt strongly about, having a candidate sit in front of me and having that conversation with them. My understanding is that prior to my arrival, that chief's interview did not happen.
Got it. Okay. Another question was, just out of curiosity, is there a particular reason why we ask candidates what kind of firearms they own?
You know, some of it will come out. It's from there you can kind of develop some secondary questions based on that. You know, are they kind of a gun fanatic? Do they overly obsess about it? Is this something that could be brought to a psychologist's attention later?
Got it. Okay.
Ed.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just impressed with how far this process has come. I was on the receiving end of a part of this in Seattle in 1975 to be screened as a dispatcher call taker. There was no computer records. All the background investigation was done either over the phone or just walking, knocking, ringing doorbells and so on. I think we filled out a 5-page questionnaire. I was impressed with what they found out knocking and talking and ringing doorbells. Years later, I had something like your job. I was sending 300 armed security officers out into the streets of San Francisco and Oakland as part of a security company doing events, and I would not send anyone out on the street without an interview with me first. But we didn't have access to anything like this. We were, again, largely phoning people and counting on them to be telling us the truth. We're not looking them in the eye and saying, would you hire this person? It's gotten far more complex, that's clear. It's a whole lot more hurdles for a potential officer to jump over, and that in itself screens out people who kind of think maybe they'd like to be a cop. I'm just impressed with the whole process, but it's clear there are questions that should be asked that might weed out problems later on that a whole slew of state laws and case law can't be asked. And that's a hobble for the department that I think the public doesn't understand. And there's not a way around it, properly speaking. So there is that gap in the process, and I think it's much created by these overlapping and not always complementary regulations. Anyway, I don't want to go on forever. Thank you.
Sean?
I was going to ask if there were any zero strike issues that you find on these questions, like domestic disputes, drug or alcohol abuse.
So part of our initial screening with the personal history questionnaire, the self-disclosure document, the department does have automatic disqualifiers in place. So if, for example, if you had a DUI, that would bar you for 5 years. Domestic violence is automatic disqualifier. Felony conviction, automatic disqualifier. Misdemeanor conviction within 2 years. So there's a list that we can go off of that will stop the process almost from the very beginning. That way we don't spend 40 hours coming to the same conclusion we're going to get to at the start.
And there are also things that bar you from ever applying here again, and because there's nothing that's going to overcome that.
Councilor Zank.
Sort of same question, but what are the typical things that bump people out of the process?
It could be one thing, it could be a combination of things.
Felony conviction's a big one, in the sense that you can't own a firearm if you're a convicted felon in this state. And owning a firearm, or being able to possess and manipulate a firearm is a bona fide occupational qualification to being a police officer. So that's a big one for us.
Dishonesty, integrity.
We'll see a lot. During our initial interviews with candidates, we'll really emphasize it's pretty intimate one-on-one interview investigation. You almost call it an interrogation, really. Just it's you and the candidate, and you really stress from the very beginning that your absolute honesty is required. And if we find at any rate or any time during the investigation that you've lied to us or been dishonest, this is going to follow you from here throughout every investigation now. So if you get caught lying here, another agency you try to apply to down the road is going to find out as well. So it's the self-disclosure thing is really big, and it could be anywhere. Like when I say it's a combination of things, it could be, are you not financially responsible? Are you not paying your bills on time? Is there a pattern of behavior here? So a lot of times you'll find patterns at the very beginning that will lead to like an overall reason why you shouldn't hire somebody.
And what's the physical test? Is it the same for everybody?
Do you mean the ORPAT, the physical agility test?
Yeah.
The ORPAT.
What do you have to do?
It's a combination of things. It's coordination. You have to do a body drag. You have to do a push-pull machine where you pull an amount of weight out and move around. You're required to hop over a bar, lay down, hop back up, hop back over, run upstairs, run downstairs, run around cones. It's a time thing, so you have to. Most people meet it. I think the state is 5 minutes or so.
And it's a state regulated or state requirement. And what they've done is they've progressed through our career, where originally it started out as being run a mile and a half and do this many push-ups and pull-ups, and the question is what does running a mile and a half have to do with being a police officer? That's a heck of a foot pursuit. And so they've created the ORPAT, which is more job specific to the tasks that you would be asked to do as a police officer. Jumping over a fence, being able to drag somebody to safety, being able to navigate staircases up and down. It's very much what the fire service has been doing for years with respect to trying to identify physical fitness based on the job task, as opposed to just some arbitrary mile and a half in time and push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, that type of thing.
Is that a recurring thing that you have to do
annually or just
No, and
once? And
that's been much debated over the year of how we how we institute a standard, a physical fitness standard that by which you would have to do that. I think what most agencies have done is gotten to a place where it's been voluntary with some incentive if you pass a certain job-specific physical fitness standard. But once the ORPAT is taken, it's very, very hard to go back and say, hey, your job's on the line unless you do X, just because of the various, there's just a variety of issues around age and those kinds of things that makes it very difficult. So.
Okay, we have one more question, and we'll move on to the next topic, but Councilor Yee.
Oh, yeah. So I'm not sure if this is in your wheelhouse, but I know we'd like to have a police force that reflects back and looks like our general community, and I'm wondering if there are things built into the system that you do to try to achieve that.
Into the background
Like
process? Or
reaching,
you talk about-
I don't know.
You talk about
like-
more recruitment.
I guess both. If that falls into what you're working on.
Well, I'll answer the background portion first. That's meant to be a standard thing, so there's no bias from the investigator. That's why we follow kind of a standard process. It's probably more of a recruitment question, like what are we doing outside of, our typical day-to-day to recruit good candidates. There's a couple different, I'll start from the very top. There's a couple different websites we use that we put out postings on. Kind of governmentjobs.com, a National Minority Update, and then our recruitment team also goes out and does events. So we'll do
Job fairs,
veteran events.
We go to the universities. We have a very, very robust recruitment strategy that, the point is that we want to cast a broad net to get as many and as deep of a diverse pool as we can get to start with. And so we have some strategies in place that not only leverage social media and the websites, but we do a lot of face-to-face recruitment at a variety of different universities, job fairs, those types of things. We're actually getting ready to just stand up a strategy that is geo-fencing the Portland metropolitan area to try and get what we think to be a strong candidate pool, strong diverse candidate pool, much more diverse than our candidate pool is here, in an attempt to try and move that needle. As an example, our most recent interviews that have gone to background, and some of those are in background, was I think a good example of what we're trying to achieve, that had a great blending of minority candidates, female candidates in there. We actually have a former U of O basketball player in this group that is, I think we're really, really excited about the prospect of her being a part of our organization. So that's a hit and miss thing. It's kind of like anybody that's ever hired anybody. You can put something out and ask for job applications, and it's really, really deep, and then every once in a while it's just like, oh my gosh, this is a shallow pool. So we kind of ebb and flow in out of a great diverse pool, and other pools that feel, just kind of a little bit shallower. So the good news is we're doing this every other month right now, and I will say that, just to kind of finish up the background, is that when I got here, I asked them to do some things that are pretty amazing, and they've actually been able to do it. That process that we just talked about used to take us 6 months prior to my arrival. We got it down to 90 days, and we only did it a couple times a year. We're doing it every other month. And I'll, in my chief's report, leave something for that. But I will tell you from a background perspective, and I've been a part of, involved at some level in backgrounds, at Benton County Sheriff's Office, Hillsborough Police Department, Richland Police Department, as a deputy chief in Hillsborough and a chief in Richland. This is the most comprehensive and robust background I've ever seen. I mean, the binders that come to me are literally this thick with information. And I think is actually, it's been very, very impressive from my perspective, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time tonight. Guess we'll move right into the chief's report.
Yeah, I'd be happy to just finish talking what I'm talking about. So, at the risk of tipping my hand, because tomorrow afternoon at noon, City Council will get more of me than they need, and I'll be talking a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish. But
Jennifer and I can step out.
I know. Jennifer knows most of this because she's one leg up on you, sir. We're at your police department is in a unprecedented time of enthusiasm and momentum around the recruitment of officers and hiring. I'm allocated 192 police officers top to bottom right now in the general fund to serve a city of 170,000. Now, keep in mind, that's not 192 officers on the road. That's more like 75 officers on the road, 80 officers on the road, and then there's detectives and supervisory staff. So it's from me all the way down to the baby cop. That's 192 allocated through the general fund. We have 191 of those filled right now. I'm not sure the last time, and maybe Kyle or Chris can talk about when the last time we've been that close to being really fully staffed. And so that's exciting. That's exciting for a variety of reasons. But what probably is more exciting is that the council took a bold move and took a chance on us over the next 18 months with the bridge funding to try to do something a little bit special during that time, and that allocated 10 more police officers. Right now, we have, because of the efforts of these gentlemen in our background team and our process, we have, and I don't have the exact number, but we have almost 40 officers in background right now to hire. And it is my intent is to hire, obviously, the 10 for the bridge funding, which is going to be important to get those on as soon as we possibly can because it allows us to do some things. But we've also identified as many as 14 officers that are going to retire in 2019. We've identified 5 of them that are confirmed to retire by June 1st. And so it's my intent to overhire by 5 within the budget that I have now for the first time, maybe ever, to have said goodbye to 5 of our very hardworking officers, and on the very same day say they're already filled. And so we are starting to actually make a difference and be able to keep up. Forever, police departments, especially police departments our size, struggle with lose a dozen, stand up a process, a year later hire a dozen, but in that time you've lost 5 more and you're just constantly trying to play catch up. We're at a place right now where I'm hopeful that by April 22nd that we will be having, I will be able to come to my leadership team and council and say that we are fully staffed, both bridge funding and general fund, which then gives us the capacity to do the things that I feel like, or at least more capacity to do the things I think that are important in this community that we're not able to do right now. And so I think the commission can be hopeful around the energy, around being a part of the Eugene Police Department. It's not uncommon for us to open the process and within the first 5 days have 100 applicants and have to shut it down. We have figured something out to the extent that we've been asked to come to Oregon Association Chiefs of Police in Chicago in 2019 and talk about what we're doing that other people can't seem to get figured out. And I'm not sure what the secret sauce is, but we're happy to ride.
You'll have an answer by then.
I'll figure out an answer. But we're happy to ride that wave. So that's encouraging. So the commission should, I would hope, would want to feel encouraged by the fact that we're really starting to make a difference on our staffing issues, or around some of the staffing issues. And then tomorrow we'll talk about what the next iteration of that means, that takes us into the future, decades into the future, that'll be able to do some of the things that we need to be able to do to take care of this community. So that's one thing that I wanted to make sure that I shared with all of you. The second thing that I will share with you around building your police department is my senior staff, which is the level with me, my captains, and my division managers as senior staff, has been with the retirement of Captain Sam Kamkar and with a variety of acting and capacity roles, has been kind of a moving target. Since I've been here since April of 30th of last year, there has been kind of a coming and going of senior staff, and we are at a place where we have a deputy chief candidate identified and that we are in background with right now, And we have the captain's process open to solidify a couple of captains to build a command team that is a chief, a deputy chief, 3 captains, and 2 division managers to be able to help run this organization. And that's critically important to create that layer at the highest level that has some stability and some aptitude to help lead us into the future, especially if we're able to accomplish what we're hoping to accomplish through building a community safety initiative. And so I'm hopeful that the next time, maybe not the next time we're together, but over the next couple of months, I'll be able to report on how we're doing that. I'm really excited about my deputy chief candidate, and so hopefully that will go smoothly. And again, we did internal and external for captains to find the best and the brightest for captains at the level. And we'll have some strong internal interest, and there will be some external interest as well for us to be able to do that. So the commission, I think, also should be hopeful around the leadership cadre being kind of solidified and stabilized as we try and kind of pick off some of these things that are going on. We are continuing to pay attention to areas of our community that we recognize are in crisis and are being stressed. There's many of them, and so I don't want to leave you with the sense that we're not paying attention to certain ones, but the ones that I know are that I'm having constant dialogue about are areas in our West University district, and had a meeting, a strong meeting, great meeting yesterday with UOPD and Matt Roberts from the University of Oregon around a partnership around West University and what we can do a little bit differently there. Continue to work with our social service providers in that area around how we can be good partners and be able to do something in West University. The Whitaker neighborhood is also one that is feeling fairly stressed around some issues around homelessness and unhoused folks that are setting up their camping sites along the public right-of-way. That's generally that piece of strip of grass between the street and the sidewalk, and some issues around an awful lot of trash that's left behind when they move, and Public Works has been good about coming and trying to clean up after doing that. That's another area. You've seen the camera most recently at the corner of MLK and Coburg to help us have some oversight around the congregation of people around the bike path that is in that area and under the bridges. We've had some success with that, just in the way of letting people know that we just appreciate a good positive behavior as you decide to spend your time in that area, and so that has been good. Our bike paths are another piece that we are hoping to accomplish over this next year with the increased capacity and the bridge funding of being able to put together a community response team or street crimes unit that we can pay attention to our bike paths. Because we continue to get information around harassing behavior on the bike paths, and those are such a gem in this community that people are choosing not to participate in or take part in because for fear of what they're going to encounter while they're on the bike path. So just so that the commission knows that there are those things that are really on our radar screen that we want to try and accomplish this year. And lastly, I will let you know that when I arrived here on April 30th of last year and tried to get some things spun up for the downtown core and the issues that we see in the downtown core, that we were horribly late around that. And this year, our game plan is to start seeing some measurable differences and some extra police presence and some programming in the downtown core in March instead of waiting until May, and trying to set a nice tone for the type of livable, walkable, and enjoyable downtown that we want to see, and be able to do that. So that's also on the radar screen. So with that, I would entertain any questions maybe that you might have.
Questions for the chief? John?
I was just going to ask you to reiterate why hiring so many officers is important for maintaining our commitment to de-escalation and stuff like that, for folks who might not have heard it before.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if you have something specific to that strategy in mind, Sean, so I'm happy to let you talk about that. But from my perspective, what happens oftentimes when you're understaffed is in your effort to try and respond to calls for service, we have oftentimes a single car go to something that can be better handled with multiple car response, just to kind of keep our present. We understand that our sheer physical presence has a tendency to calm things down. It has a tendency to ramp things up, and so we don't want to over-respond. But when we have more than one officer that can respond to deal with problems, that always is good. It keeps the officers feeling calm about things. They're not worried about officer safety as much. They don't jump to conclusions about the engagement. There's just a lot of calming effect of being able to deal with somebody that's in crisis or a crisis situation when we have those types of things. So having enough officers to respond to those calls. We're also seeing more and more calls for service that require a multiple car response. When I started 28 years ago, it was you send a single deputy to deal with something and you just figured out how to deal with it. We're seeing more and more calls for service that are complex in nature and, quite frankly, violent in nature that require multiple car response. And anytime you don't send enough resources to adequately deal with things, there's not a great outcome to that. And so we want to make sure we have the resources to be able to do that. And there's a variety of other things outside of de-escalation that are important about our staffing numbers going up in the way of outcomes that we're trying to achieve.
Something that doesn't get brought up about staffing and about losing a lot of officers to retirement, especially the people who are retiring at the end of their career, is the loss of institutional knowledge to a department. So I appreciate the effort that you're making not to have a big gap where nobody has time to learn anything new. They're thrown right into the pot because you're shorthanded. So if there's anything that a department can do to have some overlap between those experienced people leaving and the new people coming in, that's really important. Because I've seen departments in other cities where there was a sudden wave of retirements from the command level down to sergeants. And all of a sudden, everybody's new at the job. And there are things, very basic things, that were learned about individual neighborhoods, about the players in individual neighborhoods. It's all wiped away, sometimes in the course of a few weeks. So keeping up staffing is important because that's more people collecting that institutional knowledge to pass it along. And the other thing, I know we've all been told this, but keeping full staffing in Eugene is crucial when you remember that EPD is statistically one of the smallest departments for a city our size in America. So if we're short 10, that's the equivalent of another city being short 500. You think about big city. It makes a big difference. So thank you for your efforts.
No, we're working hard.
Joe.
In your ideal world, how many officers would we have? I think we're going to go up to 202, right?
Yeah,
What's
we're going to be at
ideal?
202 with the bridge funding, which we're working on a kind of a sustainable, ongoing strategy for that, then plus into that. I will tell you, and I'm not an enormous fan of the officers per thousand metric because I think that's just one of many ways we measure how many we need because every community is different in their needs. The national average is about 1.5 officers per thousand. So if you looked at it to say, hey, we would love to just mirror the national average, you can do the math on 170,000 people and how many officers we need. What we will be proposing to council tomorrow, well, actually, they already know what kind of the proposal is on what we need. Tomorrow's proposal is how we can afford it. Gets us to a place where it's right about the 250 officer mark total. And again, I can't reiterate enough that when we think about that, we think about 250 cops out on the street that you see, and that's just not that's not the case. It's a fraction of those. But I really think the 240 to 250 mark, we can start doing some pretty special things with paying attention to things that we can't pay attention to now, or don't have the resources to pay attention to now. That will move the needle on response time, shrinking response time, increasing the amount of calls for service that we can actually go to, the amount of attention we can put on any gang or violent gang issues that we are seeing crop up, controlled substance issues or drug enforcement issues around some of the, I would love to be able to have the ability to try and make a meaningful impact in this community around the opioid crisis and the fentanyl that we're seeing in our opioids that people are ingesting, those types of things. The fact that we have no initiative around internet crimes against children, or dealing with child pornography or the online enticement of children and or human trafficking that I know exists in this community. We have no ability to do those things and look, and what I often say is look in kind of the dark corners of criminal behavior and shine a bright light there. There's so many of those areas that we, an agency of this size, should be able to do. You're the second largest police department in the state of Oregon, and we don't deliver the amount of services that a second largest police department in the state of Oregon should be able to deliver. So that's kind of my sweet spot, Joel. Certainly, any more is always, we can always find something for them to do, but if I was going to land on something that I felt like would take us into the future, it would be in kind of that range.
Thank you.
Councilor Lozano.
This morning, the congresswoman from El Paso said that they were a very safe city. And the reason they were a safe city was because 10 years ago, they instituted community policing, and that has actually reduced the crime and kept them safe in El Paso for the last year. Response to that or comment?
Well, community policing has been around for 40 years, so welcome to the 21st century, El Paso. We appreciate you doing your part to embrace the 21st century document on policing. The piece that is important for us around community policing is where community policing resides in any police department, not totally, but the majority of where community policing efforts reside in a police department is in an officer's or a work group's ability to leverage discretionary time to be able to do community policing. When you have an entire police force that only has, based on our patrol allocation model, 4 minutes out of every hour, that's undedicated time. You can't do a lot of relationship building. You can't do a lot of special initiative. Criminal behavior occurs all over this city. And generally speaking, those that engage in criminal behavior are either walking to and from that, riding a bike to and from that, driving a car to and from that, taking transit to and from that. We have no ability to ever, with discretionary time, just have those conversations with those people that we stop and are suspect of criminal behavior, those types of things. So part of what El Paso is doing around community policing is leveraging discretionary time to do some of these special programs to be able to build the relationship with the community, have those conversations, be able to actually solve problems in neighborhoods that reduce crime. And part of what you'll hear tomorrow at noon is the path forward on how we do that. And so we have to find a way to create more than 4 minutes out of every hour for an officer to be able to stop by a neighborhood association meeting or do some special traffic control in your neighborhood because you're just tired of seeing the kids racing up and down the street. And I use those as low-hanging fruit examples, but those types of things are important. There's a direct connection. Oftentimes we see a direct connection to being more proactive, and this isn't about writing citations or making arrests necessarily unless arrests need to be made, but this is about having the ability for officers to engage in contacts in our community, and we don't have the aptitude. We don't have the time to do that. We're too busy going from call to call to call to call to call, and we just can't do that. So really, all we are is a very, very reactive police department, and the true measure of community policing is that bucket of time in your day that's discretionary where you can engage in that. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that before, and I agree with it. So how do you get more discretionary time? More people.
Yeah, in some cases, it's leveraging the resources we have to be as efficient as we can be. So for instance, one example of doing that is recognizing that who should be responding to the big behavioral health issues in our community that are not criminal in nature. Well, it's not your police officers.
Yeah.
And that's why we spend $1 million on Cahoots, because they answer 17,000 calls for service a year. That helps create more space for us. So we're doing some of those things that are really important to us to try and create that space. We're just we just haven't been able to create the space, even leveraging those great partnerships, we haven't been able to create the space. So it's finding efficiencies within the police department to free up officers' time. Administrative things, how do we keep them in the field more so they don't have to come back to the office to do certain things? How do they communicate better? How do we make them more efficient? How do we make sure that the work that needs to be done is being done by the right people? That's why community service officers are a big piece of this. You don't need a gun-carrying sworn police officer to go deal with a cold call that's 2 weeks old with no suspect information. Let's keep our police officers working where police officers should be working. and let's let our CSOs do. So we're trying to do some of that as well. So even with all of those efforts, we're not able to kind of move the needle on that. And so really, we're at a place where adding capacity or adding officers is kind of our last result.
I'm going to have to move us on along. We have still a lot of topics to cover tonight. I appreciate everybody's excitement. If you just write down your questions and forward them to Jeremy, we'll get answers to those questions. Our next topic is on the homeless conversation, and many of us here at the table are playing different roles in different meetings across the city and the community, and what are some of the needs, support, how do we improve the situation, and then the question becomes, as we all sit around this table, is what's the police commission's role in the homeless conversation? And this is our opportunity to bring it together and look at how our charter of the police commission and its role with the city council and the city manager, as well as the police chief, and where do we fit? So I'd like to just turn it over to the chief real quick. He's played a role in a number of the meetings I've been in, and kind of get his ideas first, and then we have our two city councilors here that might be able to shed some light there, and then the rest of us will be able to join the conversation.
So thank you, sir. First, I'd like to I appreciate or say that I appreciate the police commission's desire to recognize that they represent, or at least are representative of our community to a large degree, and that they have a desire to be involved in these tough issues, as opposed to what you could do, which is just fall back and say, all we're going to talk about is what's within the four corners of the policy. And we know the majority of your work is policy-oriented, making sure we have good policies, good contemporary and pertinent policies that give officers and staff direction on how we are going to do the work. And so I appreciate the fact that this is one of a few issues that I've been here that the police commission has said, what's our role? Well, how can we help? What should we be aware of as we're having conversations in our sphere of influence? What is it that we can do to help move forward in this direction? So I do appreciate that. There is, as Scott mentioned, there's a variety of conversations happening throughout, both in internal and external to the city. There's partnerships that are being formed that maybe we haven't seen before, especially between the city and the county, that I think are vital to moving us forward. The most recent TAC report, which I think is Technical Advisory Committee, commissioned out of Boston to kind of give us some recommendations on how we put roofs over our unhoused adult population here in the city, I think is a piece of information that I think will be informative for council to be able to act on. And so there's a variety of things that are being talked about and have been talked about for some time that are continuing to be talked about as we move forward. From a police perspective, one of the things that I said early in the process when we were trying to identify who your next police chief was is that, A, if you're looking to hire somebody that's going to fix all the problems, then you're going to keep looking to hire somebody because that's not any one person, and B, we're not going to arrest our way out of the situation. And so making arrests and writing citations and weaponizing the civil infraction is not the answer to what we do. And so, contrary to some popular belief, that's not our first choice to want to go down that path. But the piece that I've also been very vocal about, and there's people here tonight that have heard me say this before, is that if we're going to try and move the needle on people's desire to put people in safer places to be housed or safer places to be sheltered, whether it's during the day or whether it's overnight, there's a couple of things that I need. I need more housing, and I need more shelter. I need low barrier shelter, and I need essentially the ability to say that you can't, if you're asking my police officers to engage in dialogue and say you can't sleep here, is the ability to say you can't sleep here, but here's where you can sleep. So the piece that I need is the here's where you can sleep piece, and that's what's being worked on. So how we get to that point is certainly, there's actually people at this table and in this room that have some probably great ideas about how we get to this place. What I'm asking for is I'm asking for that resource, which I think that if you think about it, and we just talked about capacity for police officers, we talk about wanting police officers to do what police officers should be doing. If that resource, I think, the return on that investment on freeing up your police officers is hard to quantify at this point, but it's big. In my mind, it's big. That if we have that ability to do that, and in many cases, it doesn't even necessarily need to be a police officer that does it, but if we have that ability for members of this organization to have the resource of being able to get people into some level of stable housing, stable shelter, is an important piece of what we're trying to accomplish. And so if there's something that this commission can do as you look at this police department and policies and how do we create a police department that can be more robust, more responsive, more effective, have great policies around that governs their work that they do, this piece is an important piece with respect to creating the resource, and then by default creates more capacity for us to do what officers should be focused on really doing. So having said that, I think I'd turn it back over to you for the opening discussion.
Great, thank you. And Sean, you had something?
Yeah, so my first question, if folks who have questions that aren't on the commission, where should they send them? Like, should they email Jeremy?
They can send them to your email as well,
Okay.
and then you can forward them into Jeremy or
Compile them.
for our Friday.
So if anybody has questions, I'll give you my card after this. You can send them to me and all.
It's on the website too, I think.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Can I clarify, do we wait to respond, if we have questions, and you want us to wait?
Yeah, send them to my email address, and I will follow up.
That's not part of the... Got it.
But I always listen to you, Pastor Wayne.
Thank you. Wait,
Joe.
I don't have anything right this minute.
Okay.
Something I've been thinking about and having conversations with other entities over the past year. Particularly, I know the governor has a commission that's trying to deal with this issue, because we're not the only municipality in the state of Oregon, or even in the country, that's wrestling with this issue of what to do and how to house the unhoused. And I understand that there's a lot of moving parts to this, and we don't operate in a vacuum. We have three police departments, right, in a 10 square mile radius. And it feels like this issue is much bigger than the EPD. It's much bigger than the police commission. I'm wondering, are there other things that you're currently doing or conversations you're currently having that we can assist with, whether it be at the county level, with the governor's office, or even at the national?
That's a great question, and one that I probably am not going to have a robust answer for from the police perspective. Sure. I think I would turn us back to identifying what I believe to be a renewed sense of commitment between the city and the county to try and find solutions together, which I'm hopeful for. And so as a commission, we would continue to encourage that dialogue to keep happening and encourage that 2019 is a year of execution on some things that we've been talking about for a long time, and being able to do that. It's interesting, though, how much I've learned being here in the short period of time, that while we are surrounded by other law enforcement agencies, how much of this is still seen as just a Eugene issue, unfortunately, and it's kind of our problem to deal with. And so, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's just the landscape by which I operate in, and so I choose not to and will not shirk my responsibilities around the 50 square miles and 170,000 people that we serve here that are sleeping at night. And so so I'm not going to have a real robust response for that. I think one of the things, though, it doesn't speak necessarily to housing, but one of the things that is already, and I mentioned it earlier, is already an important relationship that I think this commission could
be really, really strongly and supportive of and continue to be supportive of is that relationship with Cahoots.
Sure.
Is that relationship with Whitebird is critically important to us as we move forward. We just solidified some additional funding in this next budget year to move Cahoots to almost 2 vans, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to be able to meet our needs. And we're doing some other creative things with Cahoots right now to try and meet those needs. And so that is one piece that we see as being very, very important for us to continue to support.
Thank you.
John.
Are there any other organizations like Cahoots who we could form a partnership with? Not overlapping what there are, but other opportunities.
Sure, and there's a variety of those that I think that those probably already exist. I think because Cahoots is just, I mean, we're talking about $1 million a year that we have built into the police department budget to help offset some of the things, some of the challenges that we see. There's a variety of other social service providers that kind of come alongside us. I think Community Court is a great example of that. I couldn't be more supportive of that model and the attempt to try and wrap somebody around the services to kind of give them an off-ramp to being unhoused and to becoming well or being in a better place. I think those are, and all those social service providers are a part of that group that are committed to being there for Community Court on those Fridays to try and help those people. But again, I can't stress enough, if there's a single biggest resource that I need as a police chief in a police department, it is the housing. Is just a place for people to be that can be safe and productive and can move them towards a position of wellness.
Alan, you asked earlier, where would the additional discretionary time from in an hour for officers to be doing actual community policing? And there's an answer in this, and that is if they're not spending time every day dealing with the same 50 people, writing them 10 citations. So something that can break that cycle for the top frequent flyers. And a lot of cities find this. They can identify a certain number of people who are taking up an inordinate number of resources.
Yeah, we've done that.
Certainly, often because they have mental health issues and so on. Housing alone doesn't help those people, but it gives the officers something to do besides just turning this crank endlessly and not getting much out of it, and certainly the public doesn't either. One of the things about that discretionary time and why it's really important for us to take on things like better homeless services that aren't the officer doing the same thing over again is without that community service time, without that getting out and walking beats time, without that meeting with neighborhood associations or walking into businesses and just getting acquainted, one of the things the department loses is the eyes on the street. All of the community connections that might help you understand a problem in depth so that you can actually get at the root of it and not just keep responding to calls with that over and over again. So what we have now in Eugene, I feel, is a situation where we're just going to 911 calls endlessly, and that kind of development of community networks and community trust and those extra eyes is not happening in the way that it should and could because we're kind of running on a treadmill.
Right. And I'm a big proponent of this. If we had the ability to do this, where we would love to be able to move towards is a geo-based philosophy of policing, where you have officers anchored districts for periods of time that really get to learn their districts, know who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, where are the nooks and crannies that they need to be paying attention to, where are the stress points and the critical points that need to be addressed. And what we have now is we have, I think, officers that hit the road with some sense of what district or what beat that they have, and then by an hour into it, it's just a free-for-all. Let's just start. We got this call coming in. We have this call coming. We just got to handle the calls for service. And so district integrity is really tough. Yeah. It's really tough. It goes back to the old. When I grew up as a young deputy in Benton County, it was really the old resident deputy program. If you lived in Alsea, you served Alsea. When you lived in Monroe, you served Monroe, and you really got to know your community. I'd love to get to a place where we have the capacity to just say, these officers are anchored to this particular beat or district for a period of time to really understand what's going on and the nuance and build those relationships. And you can only do that with a number of officers so that they don't have to run to 2 districts over to deal with things, and it creates enough discretionary time to have those conversations within those districts.
Any other questions? Comments? I see a number of touch points here, and I know that with the council, we have the budget committee starting, and so I'd like to formalize a little bit of the different touch points we have around the different solutions and ideas being thrown out there. So we could do that, and then anybody that's a part of a committee or any neighborhood community association that comes up with thoughts that they want to pass on to continue this conversation, just forward them to either Bill or myself or Jeremy, and we'll get those on the agenda.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're about to move on. So our topic says, how can police commission contribute? I'm not sure that after that little conversation, I have any idea myself what we decided. So are there policies that we should be looking at that might be helpful? I mean, I completely agree, you need somewhere to send people. You can't say, don't be here and then have no answer, but that's going to take time. That's reality. So are there policies in the meantime that we could be looking at that we could make recommendations that might be helpful?
So I think the answer is yes. I think part of what might be worthwhile for us to do is to take a look at, and Joel, I think was very clear, this is not a Eugene issue. This is a nationwide issue and more close to home, a West Coast issue. I think there's probably some work that can be done around what policies have we seen in other jurisdictions that are dealing with these same things that we haven't entertained yet. We don't know what we don't know right now. And so I think it's probably worth the research of taking a look at what uniqueness. Sometimes I get exposure to that when I go to these conferences and I sit in these meetings around homelessness and what other jurisdictions are doing. I've continued to be underwhelmed by what they do, and the fact that much like El Paso, they're about 15 years late compared to where we're at on some things. There are things that come up, for instance, around the cahoots, just as an example, around the cahoots relationship. We are right now in the process of shepherding a variety of cities nationwide through the same process, to include Olympia, Washington, Portland Police Bureau, and Portland here in Oregon. We got a call from Vancouver, BC that wants to come down and look at the program. So I do think, as much as we struggle with where we're at, and sometimes we're hypercritical about the progress we're making, we can also celebrate that oftentimes compared to our peers, we are actually doing some things. But I do think that it might be good for us to do some looking on maybe what we've seen in our industry in other areas, and then bring that to the commission for some consideration. So I guess it's a way to say maybe more to come, because I didn't come prepared saying, here's a policy that I think is going to be really, really important. Because if that was the case, then I would have had a draft for you to say, let's have this conversation. So I don't have that for you yet.
And I think in some of our sessions, we've come up with an agenda of some different items that are policy specific to the things around these edges of things. But I think where I was going is that there's a lot of emerging maybe solutions or ideas or things coming from subcommittees and other things. And is there a place to develop policies around those areas before we get into an area of what do we do? And that's kind of where I was going. But we do have an agenda. And what I think would be helpful for the commission is if we publish that in one of our Friday mailers, so that we can see maybe what the next 3 months look like in that way. And it gives you a chance to see the theme and where we're headed, and maybe weigh in and suggest topics.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Sorry about that. I should have been more clear.
No, it's okay.
Sean?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we could have, somebody from the housing policy board come in and talk about how their work intersects with policing or the various.
Sure. Good idea.
I was just going to add in that it's not as flashy as being able to say, hey, we worked on this policy, or we did this specific project, but given that this has been a topic that's been coming up for the 3 years that I've been in this position, that keeping it in the forefront, having these discussions, and always looking for ways to be able to help and address it, that those considerations then get pumped into even the little nooks and crannies of the policies that we do review, even the ones that don't necessarily directly impact. But I think that by having these discussions and having that as an important focus, that we do get side benefits that are harder to quantify by just being conscientious of that as an issue as a whole.
Scott?
Thank you.
Yo, Scott?
Good.
It's within our role as a police commission to hold listening sessions on topics. We've done this in the past. We've taken them downtown where they're a little more accessible to people than out here on Country Club Road. This isn't a bully pulpit, but it can be a pulpit. And one thing that the commission could do would be to invite representatives of the other law enforcement agencies and other service agencies in the county to something joint that is a listening session, not for complaints, but for positive suggestions. Just a thought. And we have the capacity to advertise that widely. So that is within our realm.
Real quick.
Sure.
You have this thing from Ms. Stacy that she gave us
I have
tonight?
one here, yeah, now.
Okay, so you'll be looking at the policies that she says are already, that we're doing, that are not in compliance
Yeah, I'll
with
take a look
certain,
at it. And I hadn't seen a copy previously, but I snagged a copy of both of them.
Okay, good.
And I'll take a look at it.
Thanks. Okay, so let's do our next couple topics with Sergeant Williams. And so while I appreciate your energy and enthusiasm, we're just not going to have a full-time allotted. I've had to cut my commissioners,
you keep
my
getting
colleagues
bumped,
off.
don't you?
I've made no one happy here at the table, and so I'm not going to allow you to be happy either. We can keep your conversation in both topics to, we'll start with about 40 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
We'll see how far we get.
Well, no drone tonight.
It's not exactly drone weather.
Yeah, probably not. Okay. The first topic we have is the post-critical incident procedures. We went through this last month. There weren't any particularly major points made to it, but we made a couple little additions and adjustments based on suggestions, and so it was asked to just bring it back for a very brief final review, see if there are any questions, and then move on. So, anybody have any thoughts or concerns? And it really was pretty minor stuff, like we added in the purpose and scope, we added the reference to policy 810, spelled out the Eugene Police Employees Association, and Eugene Police Benevolence Association a couple of times. But for the most part, it was pretty well accepted. So, if there aren't any thoughts or comments on it, I would ask that the commission vote to approve it to move forward with the chief.
So move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Motion to recommend approval is the next one, is the drone, right?
Perfect. So, let me just make a quick note here.
Because you did that one quicker, you don't get to add to your.
You just lost that.
Yeah, that just went away.
Hey, now.
We set that
I
up.
think I've got till 7:45, right? So for this, and really just doing the recap for now, and we can even push or finish out the policy review to next month. But the recap is really the main thing that's required by the old policy. And so for part of that, I've got some just explanation of what we've been doing this year, and then I'll have Officer Clues come up. And while he's getting set up, I'm going to kind of help build out that foundation. There's a handful of folks that are probably already tired of hearing me talk about drones. Handful of folks that haven't heard a whole lot yet. Droning, yo boy,
You're going there.
The problem when you get a champion for something is you're usually a geek for it, and with that comes some passion. So Officer Clues is going to get set up, and he's going to talk about, and it's, yep, that one right there if you can reach.
So apparently I only have 45 minutes to talk about crashes.
So Officer Clues is one of our major collision investigators and kind of the behind-the-scenes guru. for the back-end processing. And so he's going to set up to be able to show you all kind of what the back-end data input looks like and how it's helpful for crime scene reconstructions. And he's going to have about 4 minutes to do that at this rate.
No problem.
So in the meantime, while he's making sure that he's all set up, so this all really came around a year ago, and we got a fair amount of energy from 2 different teams in the city, the bomb squad, the explosive disposal unit, and the major collisions investigations team, that the technology had really kind of reached a point where there was some pretty legitimate ability for it to be super helpful in those 2 capacities. And so in my job as the policy guy, I was seeing bits and pieces from both sides, and then asked to start working on a policy. And it became pretty apparent to me as I started to geek out into it that this was something that really could help the entire department. That just about everybody in the department had a use for the machines and the capabilities that they provided. And so it gave me a unique position to be able to actually kind of start looking at what does the big picture of that look like. And so that's ultimately why we're here today. So while I was tasked with writing the policy, I also pitched a pilot program and a kind of a model for what that would look like department-wide. With the big emphasis being that rather than putting it with a specialty team that had a focus for why they had it and one thing that they were passionate about, that really the drone team itself was nothing by themselves and purely there to support everybody else in whatever mission they needed. And that seemed to be that approach was taken pretty well from people, and it seemed to make sense all the way around. So the police commission reviewed that policy 3 times before pushing it forward, and that's where we implemented the pilot program April 23rd. So to speak. I know. There's all kinds of complications in the language. And then it took quite a bit of push internally because there was a lot of concern about the public backlash, the perception, the cost, how are we going to pay for it, what does that look like? And the reality is that this isn't something that's heavily developed all over the place. Most agencies that have them are really kind of in that entry stage. And so we weren't able to reach out and say, hey, how much are you guys spending on this every year? We really have no idea. So there was a certain amount where our leaders had to take a bit of a leap and say, hey, we'll just kind of see what it looks like and see where we go from there. So that gets us to April 23rd, and then my next section. So from that, I want to try to get Officer Clues out of here as soon as we can. I appreciate him staying late tonight to be able to be here and help us out. And he's just going to talk for a few minutes, kind of show you what he gets out of it, and how it's helpful for them for the back-end reconstruction. And this is really crash scenes as well as pretty much any crime scene that they do forensic processing for.
All right, so for everybody who doesn't know me, my name is Michael, and it's easier to call me that. So we, as MCI, or the Major Collision Investigations Unit, have a 3D scanner. The department purchased a 3D scanner back in 2015. The results that we get are phenomenal, but they can be very time-consuming, and especially on larger scenes. There are places that we need a scanner for, and there are places where we do not need a scanner for. Probably the perfect example that we had here, or the one that I have up here, is in June of this year, where there was a single vehicle crash turned into a fatality right at 19th, between 18th and 19th on Washington. What most people don't realize is that the actual incident really started probably closer to 22nd at Washington. And there's a lot of distance that would have taken us probably an hour to kind of cover in order to get to all the different spots. So what we were able to do with the use of the drone as well as the scanner is we were able to get the pieces that we needed, the fine detail for with the scanner, and then to cover the large distances between, we were able to use the drone, and then we can mirror the 2 together. You see a pretty picture here, but the reality is it's actually composed of 3 different things. So if I were to take now it won't let me, of course. The color portion, and we can fly into this.
Oh, look at that.
The color portion is actually what Sergeant Williams and his team were able to bring to us. The gray, the black and white right here is actually what the scanner has. So you can see, for example,
on the drone?
No, This is what the scanner looks like, right there. And that's exactly where it was at. It was right there. And then it allows you, because it ties itself in space by itself, once it's anchored in a computer program, I can then take my camera and I can look at it from any way, shape, or form that I want. I mean, heck, for all intents and purposes, we can do it from upside down too.
Tripod mount device, something of that
It is
nature,
it is a tripod mounted device. That is correct. It doesn't have to be on a tripod necessarily, but yes, that's what we do. And you can see all these little holes here. That's where the scanner was positioned at. The reason for that is it is a 360-degree instrument. It rotates 360 degrees this way. It has a lens inside and it spins this way. But it cannot look through itself, which is why you have, it's actually conical, even though it just shows up as a cone, a circle on the bottom. But what we can do here, trust me, I can spend a lot more time than 10 minutes on the scanner, is to show we had the final rest of the vehicle down here. This is where the vehicle ended up at final rest. But in reality, this over here, you can see how long it takes to even just get there. This is kind of where the incident occurred, or where the incident started.
Oh my goodness.
At this intersection. Now there would be cleanup, if this were a final product, there would be cleanup that I would have to do, so just kind of bear with me. There's some cars in here that wouldn't be in the scene.
This is where the driver had the medical incident there.
That's what we suspect.
Fair enough.
And he actually launched himself, he went airborne starting here, and he actually landed, as you can see, right here. That's where he landed. Over that distance is how long he went airborne for.
His car went airborne?
Yeah, that's correct. So, but again, those are...
Washington, how was he going that fast?
Well, that's where I come in. I can give you those little distances and I can tell you how fast he's going.
Oh
but
my God.
Let's just say that it was more than the speed limit.
Well, yes, considerably.
That's also an accurate statement. So, but you can see this is the finite detail that the scanner picks up that I just have to have, right? And in fact, if we just, for just one moment here, to kind of contrast the difference, look in. This is what the scanner looked at right at the point where it was mounted. And you can see how nice and crisp that detail is. Let's go around and see with the scuff marks. This is where the car.
Is that the undercarriage there?
Yeah.
Yes, that's. I mean, if we can certainly talk a lot longer about crashes itself, but yes, those are the scrapes from the undercarriage. But you can see how you pick up the very nice finite detail. You can also see where presumably the oil bolt underneath, oil pan bolt underneath blew up, and then we can see kind of this trail, which again, Sergeant Williams, excuse me, drone picked up very nicely along the path, so we can kind of see where it went, and we can kind of follow it.
Oh, good grief.
Until, again, there's a need for more finite detail. So the two technologies actually complement each other very, very well. And it allowed us to probably save, I mean, you can see if we go up a little bit higher, how much of a distance, oops, sorry, I'm not trying to make anybody car sick, I did that earlier today. Between here and here, the distance, and that flight took them probably, if I lied to you and say 10 minutes, I think I'm probably damn close.
Might have been 15 because we had to do 2 because there was so much elevation.
Sure.
So in order to reach the south end of it, we had to be too high to really capture the detail at the bottom end. So we had 2 overlapping and
I'll
added a
give you
little
20
time.
minutes.
Might have been 15.
But the reality is it probably would have taken me to just scan this in black and white. It probably would have taken me an hour and a half, probably, to do it in color. Just to kind of contrast real quick. The scanner actually has the capability of color as well. Where'd it go? This one.
So let's let you reopen the streets to the public a lot sooner.
In this case, absolutely 100%, because we were able to get that distance so much faster. This is just the scanner. This is not the drone. So this is a crash that happened over on Ayers Road, and this is a truck
Oh,
It's a crash
in
chart.
the bushes,
What I'm
yes.
trying to point out here is that the scanner is capable of
Can do it,
capturing
yeah.
in color, but it takes for each little circle that you see, it takes 5 minutes. Now by itself, 5 minutes doesn't sound like a lot of time, but if I tell you that we took 14, that's 70 minutes, that's an hour and
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
And
And that
as you
doesn't
can s-
include moving and
Moving,
setup.
too.
Correct. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just the machine moving, the machine itself moving. And you can see in contrast as to overall how little coverage we have, right? I mean, we in this case, the finite details are, for example, those furrows in the grass. There are some other marks on the road that you guys can't see right now, which I'm not going to bother with. And then as well as where the vehicle comes to final rest and, the overall damage that it caused and the damage profiles. But if we had to, let's say that this vehicle is doing 100 miles an hour. If we do simple math, 100 miles an hour, converting that to feet per second is 146 feet per second. If we say that this vehicle traveled 3 seconds before impact, we're now in the distance of about 450, 460 feet, right? So for me to go 460 feet, I mean, I'm over
3
here now.
seconds.
I might, I'm being facetious when I said that I would still be there scanning, but it would take a considerable amount of time, where the drone could, at least for a crash scene, certainly capture all of the individual roadways, just kind of capture that quicker for us. All right.
Perfect.
That's great.
Yeah, any other
impressive.
questions?
My question is, how long is it going to take the camera technology to catch up for us to move exclusively to drones?
They're actually working on, there's some discussion about the scanner that they've got and the potential to mount them to drones and incorporate it together in some fashion, but there's a lot of complications that come with that.
Here's, if I may real quick, it's a good question. It's
Yeah.
a totally good question. I showed you the detail that you get from the scanner, right? I mean, you can see the burrows. I mean, it's super crisp, and you can actually see it. This is what the drone footage looks like by itself. So it's still in 3D. This is the entire scene. You saw that the black and white kind of overlaid on top, right? Looks pretty. But if you look, for
It does
example,
look pretty.
it looks pretty. But there are places here underneath that just
Yeah,
don't
you can't
exist.
see, yeah.
As we get closer, you just can't
Yes,
see
you
that
get-
same
Pixelates, yeah.
detail.
Well, and you're getting distance measurements out of the scanner?
I get, good question. I actually get them out of both. Because we can validate, I can absolutely validate the scanner's reliability and accuracy by being able to overlay the two on top of each other. I thereby verify the drone as well. So I can get the distances from both. But, like, for example, we looked at these scuff marks, right? I mean, these scrape marks. This is where the crash started. You guys, I mean, even if I pull back, you can kind of see it, right?
Right,
Yep.
yeah.
Now, if I go a little closer, because I need to have the exact spot, you can't, you lose it, you can't see it. It's because the program, it's based on pictures, photogrammetry versus actual LiDAR or laser points that come back and give you that crisp detail. That doesn't mean one is better than the other. They complement each other. There isn't one that is better. They both have different functions in order to get one job done.
So it's me a while before it gets on my phone.
It's already on your phone, you should know it.
At least 10 minutes.
And what is interesting is you can take even phone pictures or other pictures and add them into this and add more detail to that, but a lot of it depends on the sensor quality of what you're dealing with. So as the cameras become better, the sensors get bigger, they're collecting more data, then you get more data filled in there. So it's possible someday. But for now, for the level of precision that we need, we're just not, it's just not quite there yet. Yeah. For major scenes, for lower level stuff, very possible, potentially. So, cool. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's great.
That was cool.
Yeah, I thought everybody would like that.
I couldn't envision that before.
Yeah,
And
same here,
the
same here.
3D fly-through, the ability to just see the
Oh, that's
scene,
amazing.
and at the time and the way it was, it's not like looking at a Google Earth picture and then pictures of the crash scene.
As an example, sorry, I really can't speak for like ever on this topic. myself and another officer went down to the UCC shooting when it happened. And we captured the entire building as well as where the suspect was at, the whole 9 yards. Now, it doesn't exist anymore. That whole building has been torn down and has been rebuilt. So the only place where this entire incident has been memorialized for all time is actually in my computer. It doesn't exist anywhere else. So if anybody had any sort of question as to, well, what did this look like over here? What was it? Yeah, you can try to find a picture, but it's just not as good. And one of the biggest issues that we had is the suspect parked, it felt like miles away, but that's not quite true, where if we had that technology with us at the time, the drone technology, we would have been able to capture a lot more in a much, much shorter period of time. Because we walked ourselves to the cars because we had to in order for the computer to kind of put it all into one piece.
How far apart are those?
The scanner locations?
Scanner locations.
30 to 40 feet is what I like. I can probably push it out to 60 if I had to. I don't like it.
But you're confident with 30 or 40?
Yes. The scanner purpose is, or the scanner calibration is that it is good up to a 1/4 inch, up to 10 meters, so 33 feet. So if we go out to 60, we get 1/4 inch, kind of where they meet. I like to have a little more overlap. That's just part of what they require. So that's why you're moving in, say, 30 to 40 increments forward. That 30 to 40 increments is a long way if you actually have to get somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And the one thing that it doesn't do, which the drone absolutely does, is it doesn't give me the roofs. It doesn't look, when especially for crime scenes, part of what is important is the CSI factor, to look, to make people expect these kinds of things. And the drone, in some ways, makes things look very presentable because it looks, like you said, it looks pretty, right? And it is pretty. And then we just compliment each other.
Clear,
It's very good.
How much time does it take you to, once you get that raw data, to actually make it usable? Is it like that?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no.
I think so.
Isn't there an
So I'm
algorithm?
going to give you the lawyer answer. It all depends.
Yeah.
It depends. No, it depends on the overall number of scans. We joke we have one person that's on my team who likes to scan every 2 feet, or at least so it feels like. So by the time we're done with this room here, we'll have like 27, and then we have others who will do like 2 and call it a day. We're trying to still find that happy medium between. So it all depends on how many scans I have. On the average, because that's ultimately what you're after, I would say it takes me about 3 to 4 hours to get it all packaged nice and neat to make it look like that. And that's just the scans. The drones, the way the technology works, the nice thing is I can load it all up, push a button, walk away, and then by the time it comes back, it's all there for me.
Yeah.
But that's, like the scene that you guys just saw there, probably a day. But that's just the computer running by itself for a day. So when you guys make recommendations, high-end computers are really, really important too. There should be a policy that says that we should get new computers every 6 months.
Me too.
I would like that. Thanks for that, Kyle. That's really
Yeah, you bet.
Very cool.
Yeah, very interesting to see kind of that end product of what that looks like for much of what we've been doing on the pilot program here. And then Officer Fritz, if you want to come up, you just have a seat, and you can help kind of fill in with detail and info as I walk along. Help me make sure I'm not missing anything. Officer Fritz is one of our 2 pilots for the program. So we finally got the approval. Officer Fritz is on our downtown team as well currently, and then and I'll get into kind of the pilot selection here shortly. So the pilot program, because we had those 2 teams that were particularly interested, we selected one person from each of the teams. And so Detective Ben Hall, who's a violent crimes detective, is on the explosive disposal unit, and he put in for it. And then Joe Fritz was on the major collisions team at the time, and he was selected from the major collisions team. In order to try to bring in the specialties and the knowledge and the needs from those 2, as we kind of figured out how this is all going to work, and really kind of what we needed. And knowing that those were going to be maybe the biggest uses of it for the duration of the pilot program, being that it was pretty safe uses that we were allowed. Joe and Ben both got their Part 107 certification, which is the FAA certification, within weeks of being selected. and yeah, just blew through that, which is pretty impressive. There's a lot of memory and way more aeronautical information to know than is ever needed or used for drone stuff, but it's still good to have that basis of knowledge. Total so far, amongst the three of us, we have 19 hours of actual flight seconds. So that's actual flight time, not including all the scan work. The scan work is done with a different program that doesn't keep track of the actual minutes. And while it is fairly automated, it does require the main pilot to be in contact with it, observing it the whole time in case there's an issue. So that is one specific amount of time that we don't capture. And that doesn't include almost 5 hours of flight time that I have outside of here during my process of putting this together and flying my own. So actual experience together, we've got about 24 hours worth of actual flight time. The other thing that kind of kicked off at about the same time was a citywide initiative that worked at a perfect timing, and was a group that I got wrapped into pretty early. And we spent the last year creating a citywide policy authorizing the use of drones for all departments, but with a whole list of requirements and considerations. There's about 6 different sections that each policy is required to have. That policy document also creates what's called the DAC, the Drone Advisory Committee, which is made up of representatives from each city department that has a drone program and an exec that meets regularly. And then we also created a citywide drone operations manual. And so one of the requirements of the policy is that each of the city departments adopts that one same operating manual, so that we're all working under the same set of rules on how to handle them, what to do in different circumstances, how to work together, safety precautions, all that stuff. And it's about a 14-page long document.
So that's building inspectors, public works, and you guys, everybody.
Yep.
Same.
And one of the goals with this is to be able to have everybody on the same page, so that if we've got a major incident and we need help, I've got all the other drone pilots from the other departments on quick dial, and I can say, hey, Paul Gordon from Parks,
Smart.
we need 5 more batteries, and you've got 5 batteries. Can you run down here with your stuff? Or we just need another pilot. We need another drone in the air. Can you come down and give us a hand? And we're all going to know how we operate and be working under the same set of rules. Same with the fire department, emergency management. And so we actually had a DAC meeting this morning, and they reviewed our proposed policy and approved it based on the requirements of that city APM document. We are still waiting on final approval of the APM and the operations manual, and that's at the exec level, and I'm not really sure where we're at with that right at this very moment. It's
in the city manager's office. Somewhere in the city manager's office.
Or on its way.
Somewhere in a building.
It's somewhere.
Okay.
And we fulfilled all the requirements that they need, but where it currently is actually residing is kind of a mystery to all of us, and we're hoping that we'll have clarity soon. At this point, for non-emergency missions, I have to get approval from 2 of the 3, the emergency manager, the public works director, and the fire chief.
Off the top of your head, can you list the departments that are going to use drones or have drones?
Yeah, at this point, we have approved draft policies from Public Works, which is one fella, and he works for the Parks Department specifically.
Okay.
The fire department, emergency management, and police. So those are the 4 at this point that are moving forward with programs. And we're all in very close contact with each other, meeting and talking pretty regularly about topics and issues, and working on group training moving forward so that we're working together. Just this morning, we had some discussions about pairing with the fire department and working on their grid mapping of the river for doing search and rescue stuff on the river. So we've got somebody in the water and actually getting everybody out together and doing practice coordinating searches of the river based on the fire department's predetermined grid.
So instead of they're along the river bank by the bike path, they're in grid 4A.
Yeah, exactly. And we know where we're at, and okay, I'm headed to stationary point 2, and you'll be at 4, and then we'll crisscross. So try to work together.
I thought the building inspectors wanted to use them for rooftop inspection.
That makes sense.
Is that a different?
There's topic of that, but they haven't quite been at the table yet, and I'm
Okay.
sure it'll come.
Yeah. Saving a lot of time, I bet.
Yep.
Yeah, but they haven't
Safer.
quite been there yet.
Safer, yeah.
Yeah.
Much safer.
Crawling around the roof, yeah.
Yeah. So as part of the pilot program, we were tasked with creating the operating manual, which that came from the city group, obtaining all applicable authorizations, permits, and certificates. We do have the night waiver now, so we can operate after hours with a whole slew of requirements. Creation of a system for documenting missions, and what we're doing currently is there's a citywide program that we're working on trying to figure out that'll document flights and equipment. We're not real sure how well that's going to work out as our team. We're keeping an Excel spreadsheet noting each mission, the date, the case number, what it was, who was there, what equipment was used, what we were doing, if there were any issues or concerns or whatever.
Is the footage saved?
Yes and no. So the policy allows for us to actually take footage if it has a police liability issue attached or if there's an evidentiary value.
Okay.
So evidentiary value all gets logged like any other photos or videos. I hand it over to Officer Clues or whoever the MCI person is at the scene. They take it back and handle it like they do any of their other data. And then I also upload it to our digital image server so that those photos are easily accessible to any of the investigators and they can jump in. And while we're doing that scan, the other one of us that's there will usually be flying a different machine and taking more pictures. So better like specifically set up shots to just capture an aerial view of what that scene, what that area looks like. And then the flight program that we use specifically captures very specific data, including the exact flight path on the map of what the mission flew. So our devices, our phones, and the iPad that we use actually retains a flight record of every flight, how long it was, what batteries were used, where the flight was, and so it keeps track of all of that.
Yeah.
So we don't have a really easy way to pull up a computer and say, hey, we were at this place and this is all we did. We can dig in and collect all that data and be able to back it up like we were or weren't there. And yeah, we were there, but we were not over your house. Like
Right.
you can see exactly where we were at. So that's all retained pretty well.
What I wondered.
And then the last thing that we were required to do is figuring out a system for reporting to the state, and that's actually being done through the Drone Advisory Committee. And the 2018 report was compiled by Paul Gordon from Parks, where we all sent him the info, and then he compiled the report and sent it off. So that is one of the requirements for the advisory committee is to make sure that annual reporting is done. Overall training, we've done a lot in connecting with our partners around the state. So we have trained directly with the Bend Police Department twice, who has a pretty good program, and the Lynn County Sheriff's Office, who are kind of our nearest community partners, police partners that have very capable people, robust teams and equipment. We're also a part of a regional, it's not even regional, it's kind of a Northwest group. It's Southern Washington and Oregon so far. It comprises about 15 or 18 police agencies that are involved now. And we're working on quarterly training for everybody to come together at a central place. We've had our second one last month where we got a 4-hour class on FLIR, which is from one of the FLIR representatives, and it was everything you would ever want to know about FLIR and how it works. It was fantastic, yeah. It was geeking out like on really cool stuff like this for 4 hours about FLIR. And so actually next Wednesday, a steering committee of us, I think there's 7 of us, are meeting to start designing out the quarterly trainings for this next year. And then there's a push to do a 2-day conference-style training in Bend this fall, where we can actually have like hands-on practical competition type and then courses and whatnot. We've developed a central repository for everybody to be uploading their search warrant templates and affidavit templates so that we can share documents, and then we also have a spreadsheet going that has quick call phone numbers. So we've got one guy in the Portland area who they bought theirs with drug forfeiture money, and so theirs has been used exclusively for drug investigations, which is a a complicated and whole different area of drone stuff, and so. Yeah, so he's on the quick sheet. If somebody has to, if somebody gets called in to do that sort of work, they can say, oh, hey, who would I need to call for that? Pull up the list, get somebody on the horn, and be able to get like real-time Oregon-specific help with, hey, what do I need to do for this? In fact, I'm going to be meeting with him before our meeting next Wednesday to start picking his brain about what they're doing. So that's the big regional group that's been really cool to come together. Ben PD, we had an initial meet, and then they had an actual SWAT call out. They let us tag along for, where they used it to look through a window, and they were able to see the suspect, and mostly able to see that he was down, and then that allowed the SWAT team to make a movement forward with a little extra information and more safety. So it was neat to be able to see like the legit practical application, and that was pretty early on in the process. And then with Lynn County twice, so we went up, Joe and I went up into the hills above Brownsville and spent a few hours with them learning about grid searches and what they're doing for rural searches. And then we met with Deschutes, Lynn, Jefferson,
Ben
County.
No,
Ben wasn't able to make that one. I was thinking there was one more, but a big group of counties, deputies and search and rescue teams met up near Mount Hoodoo and did snow search and rescue training, and then interdepartmental, and then showing different softwares. Unfortunately, that was the day of the Cascade shooting, and we were there for about an hour before we got recalled. But that's another group that's going to be able to provide some training opportunity. So the more we can do to get more experience and see what people are doing that works, and we don't have to recreate the wheel and figure it out on our own, the better off we are. And so we've really tried to make a push into that this year with developing those partnerships.
Do you have FLIR now, or
no.
will you have?
Hoping.
What about other
Drool
departments?
off.
Like for the snow search and rescue?
Oh yeah,
can
Lynn.
it just be
Yeah.
great?
Most everybody's got it now.
They do.
Anybody that has a fairly developed, you learn pretty quickly that that's a nearly necessary.
that,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean for the price and what you get, it's incredible.
Yep.
The Lynn County deputies went out on a search for a missing hiker, and on their second battery, so 30 minutes in, they located a body that had been down for a couple of days, but was still giving a heat signature that was different than the surrounding. And so in a very, very short time, in the dark, in the cold, they were able to vector people in and make the recovery much faster. And
Safer for the searchers.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, much safer.
And the lift for that kind of a system is about $30,000. So it's a chunk of money.
Pay for itself pretty quickly.
Absolutely could. I believe so.
I think so.
Yeah. Lynn County's got 2 of those. Bend has 1. Various agencies up north are starting to pick up that full system. Yeah, so we're hoping to. Anything else training wise that I'm missing?
No.
Okay.
I had the grim thing to bring up, which is bad people can buy drones too. And this may be way ahead of where you plan to be on this at this point.
Yeah, we're not really there yet.
Yeah, okay.
We're trying to figure out our own stuff, much less figure out how to intercept.
I don't know if you have looked at any of the drone best practices stuff that I've been sending out that Jeremy resends. But there are both good things happening in that regard in terms of using drones, well, frankly, tactically, but also very bad things. You know, I saw a video of 10 small drones that cost less than $100 each, all synchronized together, that some guy was just using to practice swarming a target. Each one of those could carry explosive. They arrive in groups of 10 or 20 at once. The only counter-drone technology that I'm aware of right now consists of everything from net guns to jamming. Or attempts to take over the drone signal. But the problem with something like that sort of swarm attack is, the first warning you have that it's happening is it's happening. There's not even any evidence that a police drone as a defensive measure would be helpful at all, unless you want to ram a few of them and take them out in the air. But this is a real threat. And there are going to be individuals who want to play with individual drones in stupid or dangerous ways. And there are, and I think of the Olympics events here, people who possibly hire more complicated motivations for trouble. So I hate to have to bring that topic up.
Yeah,
but
no, it's certainly something that will eventually need to be, hopefully the federal law will catch up and allow us to be able to start building a plan for that.
Because it doesn't take much. You know, I have a $250 drone. It's about that big, and one of the things it has on it is a separate little antenna on the camera that receives a signal from the controller that tells the camera to pan up and down. But if you disconnect the camera motor from that, now you've got something that just gives an electrical spark at a button from the controller. So there's a detonator right there on a $220 drone.
I think we need to watch him.
We know who to watch.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, now you know. It's on the record.
So one last big thing we have coming up for training is I'm on a Facebook group of it's a public safety unmanned aerial systems group nationwide. And it's police departments, fire departments, it's anybody public safety, but it also has vendors in there too. So like the heads of different companies that are really big into it. I posted up questions and had answers in 5 minutes from experts. FAA representatives are monitoring, or they then know who can answer that question. So it's a really good group. And one of the guys that coordinates that group is putting on the 3rd annual Public Safety UAS conference in Piedmont, Virginia. And it looks to be a really well thought out, with hands-on training, scenario training, I guess, to discussion boards. FAA specific informational update is a 3 or 4 hour block one of the days. And so Joe and I got approved for that, so we're headed there in a few weeks. And so hopefully that'll be able to provide us with yet another round of just being up on the latest on where things are at.
Great.
Yeah. It looked like I looked at a whole bunch or several different options, and it really seemed to be the best and had the best reviews for really hands-on. And then as we hopefully launch into being able to do more significant active incident response type stuff, that's one area that we haven't been able to get a lot of experience. And so the goal is to be able to get some training more with active incident type response versus the
Is that
crime
like
scene.
a 1 day, 2 day, 3?
It's a 3-day. Yeah,
Day.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they're full days. It's
I'll bet.
7 in the morning, and then the dinner's provided as part of the event for networking, and they've got some evening events, in fact, that's surrounding around the dinner time. So
That's exciting.
It's a pretty significant.
Yeah, that's great.
But we're hopeful. I mean, you never know until you get
Yeah,
there.
true.
But this one has been pretty well reviewed, and is very affordable.
So drone camp.
Drone camp, exactly. Right.
And the evening dinner thing is what? Domino's delivering the pizza?
It's a Chuck E. Cheese.
Is this where I don't tell you that it's hosted at a winery?
Okay.
The whole event, the organizer's family, I think, owns the winery. So it's hosted by actually what looks like some pretty good food.
Well, since you just mentioned Facebook and we're talking about this, I'm thinking of the parallel when he launched Facebook, according to those folks. They didn't really think about. They thought it was going to be a wonderful place for people to share friendly. They just didn't realize.
For college students.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if the stuff that you're talking about, if we don't have to get ahead of that curve and not wait for that to happen. Not that you are, but I mean, that's something that I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Us not be waiting till something happens and thinking, oh crap, what could we have done? You know?
Well, the problem is federal law catching up because they're considered airplanes and they don't like you shooting down airplanes, which is essentially the parallel. So, and they're starting to work through that. The FAA is just a little bit slow, and as soon as we have that room to be able to be branching into it, you can bet yourself that we'll be all over it.
Good.
But it's just waiting to even have the legal authority. Right now, we just don't have the legal authority.
Plus, the FAA had to take some time off for some government shutdown or
Yes,
something,
yes.
so the request is too late.
So then, at this point, we have done 10 crash scene responses where we've done scanning and photos. from crashes to 3 officer-involved shootings. We assisted a partner agency down in Crestwell with an outdoor search, rooftop search, and crime scene mapping for a homicide scene. I think that's mostly it for the types of, a number of crash scenes.
We were activated for one search and rescue, but it was solved before we actually got
One public outreach event, we took a big group photo out for the holiday meal stuff around Christmas time at the
The dinner
service station
yeah.
down on Highway 99. So we got a group photo of everybody outside from an aerial vantage. We had the one emergency SWAT call out, and that we eventually got grounded from that because it got dark on us. And then we've had 8 what I would call significant training opportunities, which were the group trainings in the Portland area to Lynn County to Bend. And then we've done probably a dozen where we just, the 3 of us meet up, or whoever's available meet up out at the range where we're allowed to, where we were initially given authority to fly at our whim, and done a bunch of flying around down there. We really haven't had a whole lot of problems. It's been pretty smooth. We haven't received a single complaint with the police department or the police auditor's office per our internal, the IA Pro recording software. We've had 2 fairly major media coverages where the drones were talked about, one with an article specifically about it. And I have seen, and I looked and searched and listened for and asked people for feedback and got nothing negative. Really the biggest response is, Eugene's doing that? That's cool. Is probably the biggest main response I get, that people are surprised that we're pushing forward as hard and as quickly as we have. And then over the next few months, the job that we really have is to get approval to continue the program. Part of that will be a policy review next month, hopefully. We'll have a time on the agenda for it. We've got to run a process and assign a permanent sergeant, run a process for the permanent officers, determine if we would need to add officers and how many, kind of really build out what the long-term looks like. We don't want too many people because then it becomes expensive to get people trained and equipped and whatnot, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the workload's manageable. So this is kind of hard to know because, again, we just don't really know. And then hopefully working on getting some equipment where we're able to have that FLIR capability.
Yeah.
And the ability to respond quickly. Right now, with 3 pilots and only 2 drones, they're stored here rather than with people. So we've got to come here to get them to then go to a scene, which for crime scene stuff is fine, but if we've got a major incident where we're chasing somebody or we're looking for a suspect or we've got something actively happening, having them on scene and in the air more quickly is going to be important. And then just continue to work on training with our internal teams, getting that buy-in internally on just how helpful it really can be. So starting to schedule more training and more time with SWAT so that when the time comes that we work with them more, that we've got that kind of the systems in place. Canine. Bend really found that it was a little bit hard because people didn't necessarily take it seriously at first. But now their canines are calling for them anytime they're out on a track because they want the eye in the sky helping them, giving them heads up and warnings about stuff. And the same thing with their SWAT team, that it was a little bit like, you drone nerds. But the reality is, then they started, and then it was like, holy smokes, like this is actually a pretty
lifesaver.
valuable.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the top speed?
The ones that we have right now are 40 miles an hour.
Okay. Are there others available that are faster?
Yeah.
I mean, I would assume so.
Yeah, and some of it depends on, like some of them have swappable payloads. So depending on what you have attached to it will impact how fast it can go. I believe the Matrice is somewhere, the one that we'd like to get is somewhere, if you don't have a heavy camera on it, is somewhere in the vicinity of 50 or 55 miles an hour. Which means that they're stable in 30 to 40 mile an hour winds. Like ours here, we can have out in 20 mile, 25 mile an hour winds, and they'll still just hover at a pretty stable platform. And then, if I can get plugged in real quick, I have a couple of videos that kind of show you what the what the output looks like. I'm not sure where that one is. HDMI. And we're going to be done really close to on time.
You say.
Depending on questions.
Really close.
So this is a variety of training. So this is where we were with K9, had a guy hiding from the dog. That was a firearms training scenario they had set up. That's just standing around, goofing around. I mean, working.
Yeah, working.
Training.
Of course.
We went out to do to assist with some controlled burns this fall in order to help provide better video and photograph of the controlled burn. And so this is one of those areas. Paul Gordon invited us to come out, and that was a good opportunity for working on communication, talking. They actually had the fire jump the line, and I wasn't able to easily get some of that. So they wound up with a secondary fire. It was kind of funny to watch.
Yeah.
All those oops.
Yep. So this was a range training day. And then the videos are really what are particularly impressive.
Good dog.
Yeah, good boy. That dog was not letting go.
So this is one of those that kind of shows how we picture. And we're probably a little too low here, but basically being able to just give Overwatch over the top of them to be able to provide.
How high do you think you are here?
I'm guessing this is probably 75 or 80 feet.
Okay.
Maybe 100 feet. So depending on what the search area was like or what was going on, you could pretty realistically be quite a bit higher than that and be able to give more situational
Whoop, there he
awareness.
is.
But again, these are just random videos that I picked through that would help kind of demonstrate what for an active incident, what it looks like. Oh yeah, you gotta see the torpedo. We're still figuring out the camera controls and stuff, as you can see.
Yep, there he is.
There he's on his mark. And then actually you can see the other drone flying in at the top there. And then this was at that burn site again. They were running the perimeter, watering the perimeter. But like this is a good example of if we've got a violent crimes incident where we're tracking and trying to get ready to get launched onto a suspect, the ability to be able to be flying overhead to monitor it rather than having officers tailing, cars chasing, having to have bodies on the ground, hiding in the bushes, trying to wait for it to go by to then signal other people. I mean, the ability to just to track and follow. And as you'll see as we kind of come around the corner here, the ability to actually kind of gather more specific data by actually just getting down close and being able to get a better description. Or I mean, you could pretty easily get down and be looking inside the windows and providing information about who's in it, how many bodies are in it,
Sure. Yeah.
etc.
Now, your operators know enough to back off when somebody points a shotgun at your drone. You know enough, so you know enough to back off when someone points a pistol at it.
You'd be pretty hard pressed to shoot one of these with a
This is
pistol.
why I'm bringing this up. You know there are shotgun loads for pistols.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what you want to know is the dispersal cone from that versus your drone altitude.
Yeah. Yeah, it just depends on the risk. What are you? I mean, we're going to take that risk if it means that we can provide better intel to the folks on the ground.
Well, you've got. Eventually, you'll have different drones for different uses. So you would send, say, a $500 drone into a high-risk situation where you just need the camera.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. And then this is another range training day. And so again, kind of being able to see what that overhead, what that'll provide you. I got one more cool one that's just actually kind of fun to watch. That's this here.
Did you make any material changes to the drone policy from your work over the last year?
There's really nothing substantial. So if we wanted to just, without getting comments, I could talk through in probably 6 or 7 minutes what the changes are, and then that would give everybody a better to chew on, at least for later, or.
We had the read ahead too. I was just wondering if there were no material changes, if you needed us to review anything in particular there, or if you were willing to entertain a motion to continue with the draft that you have there.
Yeah, if folks don't have questions, really the biggest changes were removing the pilot program language. We carved out. I really can just do a super brief.
Yeah, really brief.
Yeah, super brief. So we mostly just cleaned up some language like the privacy, rather than saying professional, ethical, and legal. We've realigned it more to what general policy stuff would be by referring to accordance with all laws and regulations, which includes all of those. Remove the pilot program section, so the goal would be that the police commission would agree with us moving forward and being able to fly under the guidance of ORS that gives us a whole framework for how we fly, and really opening the door for being able to be using it more often.
What language do we prefer?
We removed the operations stuff because that's going to be in the operations manual, and so trying to simplify, and then there were several sections that just reference the operations manual. The team configuration was mostly just removed, so it was mostly languages removed to simplify the policy. And then the references made to the citywide operations manual. So that really is most of it. The one question that I did have from you all was the retention or release of data. Video footage or photos from actual missions may only be retained for training purposes if no one outside of City Eugene employees are identifiable. And I would prefer to remove that language so that we can just follow our standard protocol. We retain all kinds of stuff for training purposes, and then we're careful about either blocking people out. We're careful about who we share it with, where it gets shared. But I would hate to not be able to retain a good video that's helpful for training. Having videos is nothing new for us. So that's something that I would be interested in removing. And that was something that I was interested in seeing folks' opinions on. So that's 908.14, the second half of retention or release of UAS data.
Page 23.
And we mostly did that for the pilot program, just again to kind of add that layer of just being extra cautious. And then the other discussion that I would love to hear from folks is the small unmanned aerial systems. You say that and people get cross-eyed, and then you say drone and they're like, oh.
My kid has one of those.
Right?
I didn't understand that.
Exactly. And so there was a report recently from an agency who was recommending using more plain English, that it actually creates more transparency in what it is that you're talking about. And so I was curious to see what your folks, a year ago, if you said you wanted to call it a drone, everybody's hair would catch on fire. But I think that wave has just moved in a direction where people just understand the connotation, what you think of has shifted from a year ago, or especially 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious what your impressions were for what is the clearest, what creates the most transparency. It's a lot easier to just say drone team.
It is. Yeah.
And we've all called it a drone all night tonight.
Yes.
Which I think is an interesting.
The thing about something like UAVs, I mean, it sounds a little military. And drone doesn't as much, especially after the fourth time you've got your neighbor's kids drone out of your backyard. It seems a little more familiar. It's not an unmanned aerial vehicle that crashed back there.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is it sounds like most people are in agreement that you'd prefer it just be called drones.
I think that's the simplest.
Yep.
Okay.
And your unit should be called the Eugene Police Department Air Force.
Or Chair Force.
I wasn't gonna go there.
Or stick jockeys.
It seems like there's no alternative, like the decision's already been made, right? Like the drone, we've all
Yeah.
called it drones.
You're kinda stuck with that.
Kind of done. Anything else kind of feels redundant, you know? Or, again, like you mentioned it, we said unarmed vehicles or whatever else we could come up with at the end of the day.
It's a drone,
People know it's a drone.
And we're still gonna call it that, whatever the policy says, it's just what
We're
it's
still
gonna be
gonna refer
called.
to it as that.
Yeah, the common language is likely to be.
Well, Star Wars and call them flying droids.
Yeah, there you go.
Carl, what do you need to move forward? Do you need a motion to approve the draft language, or?
Yeah, if the commission is comfortable with it at this point, if the commission is up for making a vote and recommending the final policy, and with that would come recommending to the chief that the program is implemented in full at the completion of the pilot on April 23rd. So that would be the request I would kick out to the commission.
So we'd see this one more time, right? You go back and then make what is the final, and we usually look at that one more time.
Yeah,
right?
we could certainly do that, but I think we're gonna be within 97% of where we're at here.
Yeah.
But we could certainly publish it in the next month's commission packet for the final, which will have, like, that last section, I think we'll remove that last paragraph. I
Just
didn't hear
highlight.
anybody.
Mhm.
What's that?
908-14.
Yeah, I didn't hear that it didn't seem like there was any concern about that.
I think we have a quorum, and it might be good to move.
Do it while we can.
Put it in
Move
the
approval for.
And not have to
packet, and if there's a question, we can always make an edit.
That
by
next time,
exception.
yeah.
Move approval for, to approve the draft language to be brought back for final approval at the next meeting.
Nice, oh, many
All in
seconds.
favor?
Aye. Plus, when you come back with that final, it'll be much shorter than this.
Yeah, well.
And then we can say, oh, okay, this is what we're looking at. There's so much crossed out here.
Yeah,
It's
and
hard to
I-
find what's not crossed out.
As soon as I looked at it, I thought I usually try to put in the one with all the edits and a version that doesn't have any edits because it's easier to read, and I apologize for that.
No, that's all right.
That was my.
Thank you for this. This is very exciting, and I
Yes.
think it's a force multiplier and something that the whole city can get excited about. It's technology, and it really saves a lot of time, so thank you for this.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. And I really appreciate everybody's support here. It's certainly helped give the program legitimacy internally and externally to be able to have this body review it and be supportive of what we're doing. It is actually really super helpful.
That's what we're here for.
I appreciate it.
So we have a biannual retreat. We need to select a date. So if you look at your packet, we have May 4th, 11, 18, and 25, and we have different venues by date. So we'll let Jeremy give you the venues because it may influence your decision on where we have our meeting, what date.
So, for all 4 of the dates, I can get us the cottage that's over in Skinner's Butte Park, right on the river. If everybody's happy with that, because it seats just about 35 people, which seems to, I think that would fit us nicely as a kitchen. And, if you would prefer the, I don't know how many of you were, 2015, we were at the, there was a
Washington Park.
house in Washington Park. And so I can get that, and I've got that reserved for the first 2 dates. Those are the only 2 available. So I currently have all of those, so all 4 dates reserved for Skinner's Butte, and I have the first 2 for Washington Park. So depending on your choice tonight, I will cancel the other reservations and lock it down on a particular date so that the city can go ahead and rent that out. I hate to keep it locked down too much longer. Yeah.
I would throw out, well, first of all, I'll only be here the 4th or the 25th, but I would say let's throw out the 25th, just
Yeah,
because that's
Memorial
too
Day
close to Memorial Day weekend,
is. It is
graduation,
Memorial Day
prom,
Oh, never mind
yada,
that.
yada, lots of stuff.
Monday afternoon.
So the 4th is good for me, but
Oh, it's
that's
good
just
for
me.
you.
Good for me, yeah.
Okay.
I won't be here the other 2.
Okay, so are we suggesting the 4th?
I am. I
We
don't
can
know
do
what
fourth.
everybody else is
Is
doing.
everybody in favor?
4th is okay.
4th?
Oh,
Okay,
yay.
so it's it.
Well,
We're all in
yay.
agreement.
For everybody here.
You want the 4th? And
They weren't here, they don't get to vote.
Can we,
So historically, we block out the day for it, but I think Bill was hoping to finish this in about a half day. But that being said, last time we did a lunch and then we carried out over like an hour and a half or so. So it was like 9 to 2 with a lunch in the middle.
Yeah.
Sean, you had a comment?
I was just going to say, I would be interested in hearing the people who aren't here as well, if we could leave like the 4th and the 11th open for, until you get an email back from them or something. But I'm okay moving forward with the 4th as well.
Does anybody want to wait, or do we want to make the date and move on?
Well, we can make the date and then Jeremy can email the other people and say, is this going to be impossible for you for some reason? So that at least you can move forward.
Everybody here, the 4th works, and then you'd like for me to send an email out to the rest of the commission members who weren't present tonight to ask if they can meet that date. If not, does the 11th work? Does the 11th work for everybody else here?
Just not me.
Not for Terry.
Except for Terry.
Okay, so.
In Boston.
11th is. Okay.
Jeremy, which
Absolutely.
space is bigger? The house or the cottage?
They're comparable in space. I think the house has the room to fit a couple more spaces. The change since the last time we went there is they are running a daycare out of the house. And so the southern end of the building is essentially off limits to us because it's being used as a daycare. But we have the main center floor, with the big bay doors that overlook the park, and then the kitchen. So, which that's where we spent most of our time anyway.
The kitchen?
No. No, the main room.
Starting better and better.
Yeah. So, but both have a kitchen, in case we're concerned. Both have a kitchen. So it's up to you.
Dominoes will be droning in words.
Do we have a preference for location?
I mean, if no one's opposed, I'd say we do the house.
Washington Park?
Yeah, the cottage
It's
is.
convenient.
It's kind of difficult to park sometimes near the cottage.
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, they're Washington Park?
No,
Yeah, let's
and
do
the other
Washington
one.
Park.
Washington Park House.
Is that what everybody wants? Washington House Park?
Be fine.
That'd be
Park
fine
house?
with me, yeah.
Okay.
Just one or the other, you know?
And what was that?
Okay.
9 o'clock?
A couple things, the community outreach, in the Friday packets, we've been mailing out the dates, and if you've attended any of those association or community meetings, please send Jeremy a note or myself, and we'll get those updated, because I think we're behind on that quite a bit. And then any comments? I missed comments earlier. I think we're a pretty active group. I appreciate everybody's comments. Let's try to keep this on time as well, though. So, yeah.
Just one.
Good job.
In terms of the commission doing outreach, polling, I've offered this as a resource in the past, is the social media sites that I have can actually reach every single Facebook account in Eugene, whether it's a business or a nonprofit or an individual. And now I have funding to do that if need be. So if there is some point at which it would be useful to the commission to do essentially a mass mailing to everyone who's on social media within the city limits, we have that capacity. So
thank you.
Let me know.
Well, yeah.
Any other comments?
There's a thing I just wanted to mention. I stumbled across a site from USC, an institute they have there. Safe Communities Institute, I think it's called. And they had a one-page profile of an officer who have LAPD officer, a captain as it happens. Nice photograph, and then just a paragraph or so of information about him. And it struck me as such a positive, nice thing to do. He, of course, had been to one of their institutes, so that's why it was him. But it seemed to me like we could, we, the Eugene Police Department, could do that once a month, once a week, something. Because it's just such a positive contact
it
with the large public.
humanizes the-
It does,
Meet your,
it does.
meet your
And
officers.
at least with, I guess at least with command staff, like the captains and lieutenants. But I was thinking, well, why not just any officer that, well, like, that one would be a good.
Oh, what's his name
you know,
over here?
Sure. As, you know, running the drone program. I mean, it's exciting. It's interesting.
1 week we do.
What do you think about this? Wait a minute,
We
maybe
could-
you don't want your picture in the
Him
paper.
holding the drone. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that as a, and I've got, if you want, anybody wanted to see the website, I made.
I like that.
There
made
was
note of
some
it.
department in the early 70s actually did like baseball trading cards, and the officers actually went out.
Oh, we had them in the
So this is kind of like that, isn't it?
Collect them all.
Yeah.
We've got them right now for our canines. They recently did a big batch for the canines.
Is that right?
Like trading cards, yeah, so they can hand them out to kids and
It's
stuff.
really
and
cool.
functions, yeah.
Anyway,
Thank you.
positive idea.
Did everybody see the Jennifer Ye poster for recruitment?
Tiffany and I did not know our picture
I
was
did
being
not.
taken. It's like, have you seen that? It's awful. We look so bored.
And you'll be sad to know that I'm spending some money promoting that on social media right now.
There's advisory,
Oh, I think it looks like you're paying rapt attention.
Yes, we
there's
are
advisory
probably learning about the
positions
world's
open
worst
on almost
spreadsheet.
everybody, so March
Land
10th
use
is the
spreadsheet
deadline.
is like so awful.
So we have those, so since you guys have your community outreach, if you want to take one of those flyers with you and make sure you post Councilor Yea's picture.
And Jennifer would be
all
happy
over.
to sign it.
And we'll tell them to call her if you have any issues.
But in all seriousness, if you know of somebody, I mean, we're going to be replacing some of these commission positions here.
Yeah.
If you know of somebody and you want to be making a recommendation to them, you know, maybe share with them what your experience has been.
Let me take one for my,
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll let me post it at the Y. I don't know if they'll let me
Right,
post
or
it at
any
the Y.
commission or board,
Budget,
but
it's got some.
We could really use more diverse folks signing up and just more choices of people.
Yep.
You know, especially geographic diversity too.
I mean, not all South Eugene.
Well, I wasn't gonna say it
Go
out
ahead.
loud.
People do.
but-
People do.
Anybody want to take one to post somewhere?
Any further comments?
I'll take some more. Yeah, we need
Move to
more
adjourn.
white.
Yeah.
All right.
Quick clarification question. Do you want a few minutes on the next month's agenda for the drone, for the last final checkoff, or just published in the pamphlet?
Final checkoff.
Final checkoff. Copy.
Won't hurt.
For final,
Perfect.
brought back for
Yeah.
final review.
It'll be
Perfect.
quick.
But we're not seconding your motion to adjourn.
I guess there was a motion to adjourn and a second.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate the backup. Yes,
With your coat on, we didn't.
Oh, yeah. No, you can get them.